The town of Millfield wasn't accustomed to mysteries. Located in northwestern Pennsylvania, it was the kind of place where neighbors knew the contents of each other's refrigerators and the daily schedules of one another's children. But a place where doors remained unlocked and where the evening news from larger cities served as entertainment rather than cautionary tales. November 5, 2002. Election Day. The air carried the crisp bite of autumn, leaves crunching underfoot as residents made their way to the polling station at Millfield Elementary School. Red, white, and blue bunting hung from the gymnasium entrance. Paper coffee cups warmed hands chilled by the morning frost. Campaign volunteers handed out final pamphlets that would soon be discarded. Their purpose served once voters stepped behind the curtain to cast their ballots. For the Peterson family, Election Day was sacred. Diane Peterson, 42, had instilled in her son Trevor, 16, the importance of civic duty. Even when her husband Jack's work as a long-haul trucker kept him away from home during elections, Diane never missed voting. She'd bring Trevor along, explaining the process, the importance, the privilege that came with participation in democracy. "This is how we make our voice heard," she'd tell Trevor. "Never take it for granted." This particular Tuesday, Trevor had stayed home to finish a science project due the next day. Diane had promised to pick up dinner on her way back from voting his favorite, pepperoni pizza from Luigi's. She'd left at 4:23 p.m., her red Toyota Corolla pulling out of their driveway, Diane waving goodbye through the driver's window. It was the last time Trevor Peterson would see his mother. By 6:30 p.m., the pizza had grown cold on the kitchen counter. Trevor had called his mother's cell phone 7 times, each call going straight to voicemail. He'd tried Luigi's, thinking perhaps she'd been chatting with the owner, Rosa, as she often did. No one had seen her. By 8:15 p.m., Trevor had called his father, who was 3 states away in Indiana. Jack had instructed his son to call the police. By 9 p.m., Officer Donna Walsh had arrived at the Peterson home, taking initial details for what would become the first missing persons report filed in Millfield in over a decade. "Son, when did you last speak with your mother?" Officer Walsh asked, pen poised over her notepad. "When she left to vote," Trevor replied, his voice tight with mounting dread. "She said she'd be right back." The Toyota was found in the elementary school parking lot, locked, with Diane's purse still inside. Her wallet, containing $42 and all her credit cards, sat untouched. Her phone was not in the car, nor was it ever found. The polling station workers remembered Diane arriving. They remembered checking her name on the voter roll. They remembered directing her to booth number 7. What they couldn't remember, what no one could explain, was seeing Diane Peterson leave. Surveillance footage from the school's single security camera showed Diane walking into the building at 4:47 p.m. The camera, positioned to monitor the main entrance, never captured her walking out. The timeline established by investigators seemed impossible. Diane Peterson had entered voting booth 7 at approximately 4:52 p.m. The woman who used the booth after her, Elaine Montgomery, entered at 5:08 p.m. and reported nothing unusual. 16 minutes, during which a 42-year-old woman had simply vanished. Police searched the school building repeatedly. They checked every classroom, every closet, every bathroom stall. They examined the air ducts, the basement, the roof access. They brought in dogs who found no scent trail beyond the gymnasium. Millfield Elementary School had only 2 exits, the main entrance under camera surveillance and a fire exit at the rear of the gymnasium. The fire exit was equipped with an alarm that would sound if opened. According to the election volunteers and the school custodian, no alarm had been triggered that day, and the case defied explanation. A woman had walked into a crowded polling station and never walked out. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, no personal enemies or conflicts, no history of mental illness or memory problems, no financial troubles, no secret relationships, no reason to disappear voluntarily. The search for Diane Peterson would become one of the most perplexing missing persons cases in Pennsylvania history. In the days that followed, the community mobilized. Volunteers combed the woods surrounding the school. Divers searched the lake 2 miles away. Flyers with Diane's photo appeared in store windows throughout the county. Local news covered the disappearance nightly. Jack Peterson, devastated and confused, took indefinite leave from his trucking job to stay home with Trevor and coordinate search efforts. He appeared on regional television, pleading for information about his wife. "Please, if anyone saw anything at all, Diane is our whole world," Jack said, his voice breaking as Trevor stood silently beside him. "We just want her home." As weeks passed without leads, the case grew colder. The FBI had been consulted but found no evidence connecting Diane's disappearance to any known cases. There was no ransom demand, no suspicious bank activity, no use of her cell phone or credit cards after her disappearance. It was as if Diane Peterson had stepped behind a voting booth curtain and stepped out of existence. For Trevor Peterson, life became divided into 2 periods, before and after. Before, when his mother had been there to quiz him on history dates and remind him to wear a coat. After, when the house fell silent except for the sound of his father's pacing at night. The investigation eventually slowed, then stalled. Other cases demanded attention. The news moved on to fresher tragedies. But even the most dedicated volunteers returned to their regular lives, their concern for the Petersons never fading but their active involvement necessarily diminishing. Jack and Trevor remained in Millfield, unable to leave the place where Diane had last been seen. Jack took a local job at an auto parts warehouse. Trevor finished high school, his graduation marked by the empty chair they'd reserved in Diane's honor. Life continued, as it must. But for the Petersons, time had stopped at 4:52 p.m. on November 5, 2002. The years passed. 2003, 2004. The investigation was officially classified as cold but never closed. Detective Roy Harmon, who had led the initial investigation, kept a copy of the case file on his desk until his retirement in 2008. Diane's photo, showing a woman with auburn hair and a warm smile, remained pinned to the department's bulletin board long after similar notices had been taken down. By 2010, Trevor had graduated from Penn State with a degree in computer science. He returned to Millfield and took a job that allowed him to work remotely, unwilling to leave his father alone in the house filled with memories. Together, they maintained a ritual of visiting the elementary school on the anniversary of Diane's disappearance, standing silently in the parking space where her car had been found. Jack Peterson died of a heart attack in 2013. Trevor found him in his armchair, a photo album open on his lap to pictures of their family vacation to Niagara Falls, taken the summer before Diane vanished. At the funeral, many of the same people who had searched for Diane gathered to support Trevor, now alone with the weight of unanswered questions. Trevor might have left Millfield then. Nothing held him there except memories and mystery. But leaving felt like abandonment of his hometown, of the investigation of his mother who might somehow, against all odds and logic, will find her way back to the place she'd last been seen. So he stayed, working from the home where he'd grown up, occasionally dating but never forming lasting relationships. How could he explain to someone new the obsession that still drove him? How could anyone understand his need to solve the unsolvable, to find logic in what seemed beyond explanation? The turning point came unexpectedly in the summer of 2016, nearly 14 years after Diane's disappearance. Millfield Elementary School had been slated for renovation. The original 1962 building would be partially demolished to make way for a modern addition. Trevor, hearing this news, felt a visceral panic. What if there were answers hidden within those walls? What if renovation destroyed evidence that had somehow been overlooked? He approached the current police chief, Martin Lopez, with his concerns. Chief Lopez, who had been a junior officer during the original investigation, understood Trevor's anxiety. He arranged for a thorough examination of the areas scheduled for demolition before construction began. The gymnasium where the voting booths had been set up was not part of the demolition plan, but Trevor insisted on being present when police searched the building again. Chief Lopez agreed, perhaps out of sympathy, perhaps recognizing that this cold case remained a wound in the community's history. On July 17, 2016, Trevor stood in the gymnasium where he'd last seen his mother alive. The space looked smaller than he remembered, the basketball hoops lower, the walls more faded. He watched as officers methodically examined the space, focusing on areas that might have been overlooked in previous searches, behind wall padding, under the retractable bleachers, inside equipment storage closets. Nothing new was found. Trevor hadn't really expected otherwise. The building had been searched thoroughly multiple times in the days after his mother's disappearance. But being there, standing in the space where the mystery began, stirred something within him, a determination that had been dormant during his years of quiet grieving. As the officers prepared to leave, Trevor asked if he could see the former principal's office, which was among the rooms scheduled for demolition. The current principal, Dr. Fiona Reynolds, led him there, explaining that most of the old files and furniture had already been removed in preparation for construction. The office looked bare, with rectangular outlines on the walls where pictures had once hung and dust-free spots on the carpet where filing cabinets had stood. Dr. Reynolds excused herself to take a phone call, leaving Trevor alone with his thoughts. He wasn't sure what drew him to the closet at the back of the office. Perhaps it was simply the desire to leave no stone unturned, to examine every corner of this building that had swallowed his mother whole. The closet door stuck slightly, requiring a firm pull to open. Inside, he found empty shelves and a single cardboard box pushed against the back wall. The box was unremarkable, the kind used for storing old documents. No labels, no distinctive markings. It might have been overlooked during the office clearing, deemed unimportant or forgotten in the transition. Trevor pulled it forward, expecting to find old school records or office supplies. Instead, when he lifted the lid, he found a collection of items that stopped his breath. A woman's wristwatch with a cracked face showing 5:01 p.m., a cell phone, an older flip model, a single earring, gold with a small pearl, and at the bottom of the box, a folded piece of paper. His hands trembled as he recognized the items. The watch had been his mother's, a gift from his father on their 15th anniversary. The phone looked like the one she'd carried. The earring matched a pair she'd worn frequently. With unsteady fingers, Trevor unfolded the paper. It was a voter roll from November 5, 2002. Names were checked off in blue pen, the marks neat and methodical until midway down the page, where a single name was circled in red, Diane Peterson. Below her name, written in handwriting Trevor didn't recognize, were the words, "She saw." Trevor's mind raced. She saw what? Who had written this? How had these items ended up in this box, in this closet, undiscovered for 14 years despite multiple searches? He called out for Dr. Reynolds, for the officers who were still in the building. His voice echoed in the empty office, tight with a mixture of shock and vindication. He wasn't crazy. Something had happened to his mother. Something connected to this school, to that election day, to whatever it was that she had seen. Chief Lopez arrived quickly, his expression shifting from concern to professional intensity as Trevor showed him the contents of the box. The items were carefully bagged as evidence, the voter roll placed in a document protector. The chief immediately called the state police, requesting forensic assistance and the reopening of the investigation. "Trevor," Chief Lopez said quietly as they watched the evidence being catalogued, "I need to prepare you. This doesn't mean we will find all the answers, but it's the first new lead in a very long time." Trevor nodded, unable to speak past the knot in his throat. For 14 years he'd lived with the ghostly presence of his mother's absence. Now, he had proof that something sinister had occurred, that she hadn't simply walked away or been the victim of her own mental state, as some had begun to speculate over the years. The next few days passed in a blur of police interviews and evidence processing. The phone was too damaged to yield any data. The watch had stopped at 5:01 p.m., 9 minutes after Diane had entered the voting booth. The earring showed no unusual marks or DNA besides what would be expected from its owner. The voter roll provided the most promising lead. All forensic analysis revealed fingerprints belonging to the election workers who had handled it that day, as well as a partial print that didn't match anyone in the system. The red circle and handwritten note had been added with a different pen than the check marks, suggesting they were not part of the normal voting process. Trevor spent hours reviewing the original case files, granted access by Chief Lopez, who recognized that no one was more motivated to solve this case. The files contained interviews with everyone present at the polling station that day, including election workers, voters, and school staff. One name caught Trevor's attention: William Garner, who had been the school principal in 2002. According to the files, Garner had left the building at approximately 4:30 p.m. before Diane arrived. His statement indicated he'd gone home early with a migraine. This alibi had been confirmed by his wife, who reported he'd been home with her for the remainder of the evening. What struck Trevor as odd was that the box had been found in what had been Garner's office. If the principal had left before Diane arrived and never returned that evening, how could he have been involved? And yet, the location of the evidence seemed too coincidental to ignore. Trevor decided to track down William Garner. The former principal had retired in 2009 and moved to Arizona, according to social media. Trevor's research revealed that Garner had returned to Pennsylvania 3 years later, settling in Pittsburgh, just 2 hours from Millfield. Chief Lopez was hesitant when Trevor proposed interviewing Garner. "This is an active investigation now, Trevor. We need to follow proper procedures." "I understand," Trevor replied, "but I have waited 14 years. I can't just sit back and wait longer. I'm not asking to confront him, just to talk. Maybe there's something he remembers that he didn't think was important back then." After lengthy discussion, a compromise was reached. Trevor could accompany Detective Diane Park to interview Garner, with the understanding that he would let the professional lead the questioning. William Garner now lived in a modest apartment in a Pittsburgh suburb. At 72, he appeared frailer than the authoritative figure Trevor remembered from his youth. His hair had thinned, his shoulders hunched slightly, his eyes magnified behind thick glasses. "Mr. Garner," Detective Park began after introductions, "we are reinvestigating the disappearance of Diane Peterson from Millfield Elementary in 2002. You were the principal at that time." Garner nodded, his expression guarded. "Yes, I remember. Terrible business. Did you find something new?" "We have discovered some items that belong to Mrs. Peterson," Detective Park said, watching Garner's reaction closely. "They were found in a box in your former office at the school." And the color drained from Garner's face. His hands, resting on his knees, began to tremble visibly. That's not possible," he whispered. "Those items were supposed to be gone. They promised they would handle everything." The words hung in the air, damning in their implication. Trevor felt his heart hammering in his chest, rage and grief threatening to overwhelm him. Detective Park placed a restraining hand on his arm, a silent reminder of their agreement. "Who promised, Mr. Garner?" Detective Park asked, her voice steady and professional despite the breakthrough. "Who was supposed to handle everything?" Garner looked up, seeming to truly notice Trevor for the first time. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You are her son," he said. "You have grown up." Trevor nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Garner sighed deeply, the sound of a man unburdening himself after years of carrying a terrible weight. "I didn't know what they were going to do to her," he said. "I swear I didn't know. They just said they needed to talk to her, to make sure she understood the importance of keeping quiet." "And who are they, Mr. Garner?" Detective Park pressed. "The men who came about the voting machines," Garner replied. "And they installed them the weekend before the election. The special new ones, just for our precinct. Said it was a pilot program." Trevor and Detective Park exchanged glances. The 2002 election had used traditional voting methods in Millfield paper ballots and manual counting. There had been no mention of electronic voting machines in any of the case files. "These men," Detective Park continued, "did they have names?" "Identification. They had government ID badges," Garner said. "At least that's what they showed me. Department of Election Security," they said. I'd never heard of such a department, but they had the right paperwork. The official letterhead. Signatures from people in the state government. He paused, rubbing his forehead as if trying to massage away the memories. They came back on election day, said they were monitoring the machines. Then I got a call your mother had seen something she shouldn't have. One of the men told me to go home, that they would handle it. I was afraid they implied there could be trouble for me if I interfered. What had my mother seen? Trevor asked, unable to remain silent any longer. Garner shook his head. I don't know for certain. But there was talk about the machines being programmed to register votes differently than how they were cast. Your mother was an engineer at the technology firm in Erie, wasn't she? Maybe she noticed something about the machines that others wouldn't. Trevor felt cold. His mother had indeed worked as a software engineer, specializing in user interface design. She would have had the knowledge to recognize if something was wrong with voting technology. Did you ever see these men again? Detective Park asked. No, Garner replied. But the next morning, those items, the phone, the watch, the earring, they were on my desk with the voter roll. No note. No explanation. I should have gone to the police then. I know that now. But I was scared. And when the police searched the school and didn't find anything, I convinced myself that maybe she had just left, that the items were planted to frame me somehow. So you hid them, Trevor said, anger edging his voice. I put them in the box and hid it in my closet, Garner admitted. Each time the police came back to search, I told myself I would come forward. And each time I failed to find the courage. When I retired, I should have taken the box with me or destroyed it. But I couldn't bring myself to do either. Part of me wanted it to be found, I suppose. Part of me wanted the truth to come out. Detective Park continued the interview, gathering details about the mysterious men, the supposed voting machines, and the events of that day. Garner's testimony, while disturbing, provided a foundation for a new line of investigation, one that suggested Diane Peterson's disappearance might be connected to something far larger and more sinister than anyone in Millfield had imagined. As they left Garner's apartment, Trevor felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at Garner's cowardice, relief at finally having some explanation, fear about what his mother might have uncovered, and beneath it all, a gnawing dread about what might have happened to her after she stepped into voting booth number 7. What happens now? Trevor asked as they drove back to Millfield. Now we follow the evidence, Detective Park replied. We look into this Department of Election Security, which I have never heard of. We investigate whether there were indeed voting machines installed at Millfield Elementary. We try to identify these men Garner described. She glanced at Trevor, her expression softening slightly. I can't promise we will find your mother, Trevor. It's been 14 years, but I can promise we will do everything possible to find the truth. The truth. After so many years of questions, it seemed both tantalizingly close and still frustratingly out of reach. Trevor stared out the window at the passing Pennsylvania landscape, thinking of his mother, wondering if she was still somewhere in this world. Had she been silenced permanently, or was she being held somewhere, a living ghost whose crime was seeing something she shouldn't have? Back in Millfield, the investigation accelerated. Chief Lopez established a task force, bringing in resources from the state police and FBI. Garner's statement was evaluated, his background thoroughly investigated. Records were requested from the State Election Board regarding any testing of electronic voting machines in 2002. Trevor threw himself into research, using his computer skills to dig through archives of local news, government records, and election data. He created a timeline, mapping every known movement and interaction from that November day. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after the discovery of the box. A former county election official, now living in Florida, responded to investigators' queries with startling information. There had indeed been a pilot program for electronic voting machines planned for the 2002 midterm elections in several Pennsylvania counties. However, the program had officially been cancelled 2 months before Election Day due to security concerns raised during testing. According to official records, no electronic voting machines had been delivered to Millfield Elementary or any other polling station in the county. No Department of Election Security had been authorized to install or monitor such machines. And yet, William Garner insisted that men claiming to represent this department had installed machines in the Millfield Elementary Gymnasium. Men who had later expressed concern that Diane Peterson had seen something she shouldn't have. Men who had somehow acquired her personal items after she vanished. The implications were disturbing. If these men were not legitimate government representatives, who were they? But what was their purpose in installing unauthorized voting machines? And most crucially for Trevor, what had happened to his mother after she discovered whatever it was they were doing? As summer turned to fall in 2016, the investigation continued to uncover troubling connections. Similar reports of unauthorized personnel claiming to be election officials had emerged in 3 other Pennsylvania counties during the 2002 elections. But in each case, the individuals had shown credentials identifying them as being from the non-existent Department of Election Security. In each case, their presence had gone unreported until investigators specifically asked about them. No other disappearances had been connected to these incidents. But mass to be few. The pattern suggested an organized effort to access voting systems under false pretenses, an effort that had somehow led to Diane Peterson's disappearance, when she noticed that something amiss, mumbled or burn. For Trevor, each new piece of information was both a vindication and a wound reopened. His mother hadn't simply walked away. She hadn't been the victim of random violence. She had seen something significant enough that people had taken extraordinary measures to ensure her silence. As November 2016 approached, bringing with it another presidential election and the 14th anniversary of Diane's disappearance, Trevor felt a growing sense of urgency. The investigation had stalled again, the trail growing cold despite the new evidence. But the men described by Garner remained unidentified. The nature of what Diane had seen remained unclear. On November 5, 2016, Trevor stood in the parking lot of Millfield Elementary School, as he had done every year on that date. But this time he wasn't alone with his grief. Detective Park stood beside him, along with Chief Lopez and several officers who had worked on the case. "We won't give up, Trevor," Chief Lopez said quietly. "Even if it takes another 14 years, we will keep looking for answers." Trevor nodded, grateful for their presence but feeling the familiar weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. 14 years of questions. 14 years of imagining countless scenarios, each more terrible than the last. 14 years of hoping for closure while dreading what that closure might reveal. As the group prepared to leave, Trevor's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, with an area code he didn't recognize. "Hello," he answered, stepping away from the others. There was a moment of silence on the line. Then a voice, female, hesitant, older than he remembered but unmistakable in its cadence. "Trevor?" It's Mom." Trevor's legs gave way beneath him. He sank to his knees on the cold pavement, the phone clutched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Around him, the officers rushed forward in concern, but their voices seemed distant, unimportant compared to the impossible sound in his ear. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Is it really you? Where are you?" "I don't have much time," the voice replied, the sound of his mother sending shockwaves through Trevor's system. "They are watching, but I saw on the news that they found my things. That the case was reopened. I had to risk calling." "Where are you?" Trevor repeated more urgently now. "We will come get you." "No," Diane Peterson said firmly, "it's not safe. Not yet, but soon. I have gathered evidence over the years about what I saw that day, about what they have been doing with the voting systems. I'm going to expose everything." "Who are they? What did you see?" Trevor asked, desperate to understand, to hold on to this connection that might vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. "A private company working with foreign interests," Diane replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They were testing software designed to alter vote counts in specific races. Subtle changes, nothing that would trigger automatic recounts, but enough to sway close elections. And I recognized the code structure. When they realized I understood what I was looking at. She paused, and Trevor could hear her breathing quicken. I have to go. They are coming back. November 8th. Election Day. Carver Street Bridge in Pittsburgh. Midnight. Come alone, Trevor. If they suspect authorities are involved, they will kill me. They have threatened to before. Mom, wait. I love you, Trevor. I have missed you every day. Tell your father. Dad's gone, Mom. Trevor interrupted, tears streaming down his face. Heart attack. 3 years ago. There was a moment of shocked silence. Then softly, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. For him. I'm going to make this right, Trevor. I promise. November 8th. Midnight. Come alone. Tom. The line went dead. Trevor lowered the phone, his mind reeling, his body numb with shock. Detective Park was crouched beside him, her expression concerned. Trevor? What happened? Who was that? He looked up at her, at all the officers gathered around him, at Chief Lopez, whose face showed alarm at Trevor's reaction. These were good people who had dedicated themselves to finding the truth about his mother's disappearance. They deserved to know. They could help ensure her safety. But his mother's words echoed in his mind. If they suspect authorities are involved, they will kill me. After 14 years of searching, of wondering, of grieving, Trevor had found his mother alive. He couldn't risk losing her again. Wrong number, he lied, wiping away his tears. Just the anniversary. It hit me harder than usual this year. The officers exchanged glances, clearly not believing him but uncertain how to press further. Detective Park helped him to his feet, studying his face with professional suspicion. You know you can trust us, Trevor, she said quietly. Whatever it is, we can help. Trevor nodded, avoiding her gaze. I know. I'm just tired. I think I need to go home. As the group dispersed, Trevor remained in the parking lot, staring at the space where his mother's car had been found 14 years ago. His mind raced with questions, with plans, with fear and hope intertwined so tightly he could barely distinguish between them. His mother was alive. She had been held against her will, or perhaps had gone into hiding because of what she had witnessed in that voting booth. She had evidence of election tampering by private interests working with foreign powers. And in 3 days, on another election day, she planned to meet him and expose everything. Could he trust that it was really her? The voice had been recognizable, yes, but 14 years was a long time. Memory could play tricks, and if someone had been monitoring the investigation, they might know enough about Diane Peterson to craft a convincing impersonation. But if it was her, if his mother had somehow survived all these years and was finally ready to come forward, how could he not go to that bridge? How could he risk losing this chance to see her again, to help her reveal the truth? Trevor walked slowly to his car, his decision forming with each step. He would go to the bridge alone, as instructed. But he would take precautions. He would record everything. And he would leave a sealed letter with his lawyer, to be opened if he didn't return, containing all he knew about his mother's case and the details of the planned meeting. As he drove home through the streets of Millfield, past familiar houses and businesses that had been the backdrop to his search for answers, Trevor felt something he hadn't experienced in 14 years, hope. Dangerous, fragile hope that threatened to shatter with each doubt that crept into his mind. 3 days. 3 days until he might see his mother again. 3 days until the mystery that had defined his life might finally be solved. Unless it was a trap. Unless the voice hadn't been his mother's at all, but someone who wanted to silence the investigation permanently. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to decide who to trust. 3 days to plan for either a joyful reunion or a deadly confrontation. Trevor Peterson drove home through the darkening November evening, carrying the weight of 14 years of questions and the tantalizing possibility of answers. Behind him, the elementary school stood silent, its walls still holding secrets about the day Diane Peterson stepped into voting booth number 7 and vanished from the world. In 3 days, if the voice on the phone was to be believed, those secrets would finally be revealed. In 3 days, Trevor would learn whether his mother had truly found her way back to him, or whether hope, like so many leads before, would prove to be yet another dead end in the long, painful search for truth. The 3 days following the phone call passed with excruciating slowness for Trevor Peterson. Each hour stretched like taffy, minutes ticking by with agonizing deliberation as November 8th, 2016 election day approached. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of his mother's voice and shadowy figures manipulating voting machines. During daylight hours, Trevor maintained a carefully constructed facade of normalcy. He answered calls from Detective Park with practiced casualness, assuring her that he was holding up well despite the emotional anniversary. He responded to emails from work colleagues, participated in video conferences, and even made small talk with neighbors who had no idea of the storm raging inside him. Alone in his house, however, Trevor meticulously prepared for the midnight meeting at Carver Street Bridge. He purchased a high-quality voice recorder and a small body camera that could be concealed under clothing. He researched the bridge location, studying satellite images and street views, identifying potential escape routes and vantage points. The Carver Street Bridge spanned the Allegheny River on the eastern edge of Pittsburgh, connecting an industrial area with a neighborhood of weathered brick apartments and forgotten warehouses. It wasn't a major crossing. Most commuters preferred the larger, better-maintained bridges downtown, but it provided a direct route between several working-class neighborhoods. At midnight, especially on a Tuesday in November, it would likely be deserted. Trevor also took precautions in case the meeting was a trap. He drafted a detailed letter containing everything he knew about his mother's disappearance, the discovery of her belongings, William Garner's confession, and the phone call claiming to be from Diane. He sealed this document in an envelope which he delivered to his lawyer, Angela Winters, with instructions to open it and forward the contents to law enforcement if he didn't contact her by noon on November 9th. "This is unusual, Trevor," Angela had said, studying him with concern as she accepted the envelope. "Do you want to tell me what's going on?" "It's just a precaution," he'd replied, avoiding her gaze. "Related to Mom's case. You will probably be hearing from me tomorrow morning, and then you can just shred it." By November 8th, Trevor's nerves were stretched to breaking point. He voted early at Millfield Elementary, the familiar gymnasium now renovated with bright new paint and modern lighting fixtures. Standing in a voting booth, not number 7, which he purposely avoided, he found himself scanning the room, wondering if anyone was watching, but if the electronic voting machine before him was truly recording his selections as intended. The memories of his mother's words echoed in his mind. They were testing software designed to alter vote counts, subtle changes, nothing that would trigger automatic recounts, but enough to sway close elections. Could it be happening again? 14 years later? Were the machines in this very room compromised? Trevor completed his ballot, a sense of unease following him as he exited the school building. As evening approached, Trevor packed a small backpack, the recording devices, a flashlight, extra batteries, a first aid kit, and a change of clothes for his mother. He didn't know what condition she might be in, whether she would need medical attention or fresh clothing, but he wanted to be prepared for any possibility. At 9:30 p.m. he left Millfield for the 2-hour drive to Pittsburgh. Light rain had begun to fall, droplets racing across his windshield as he navigated the familiar highway eastward. The radio broadcast election results from states where polls had already closed, commentators speculating on outcomes and turnout numbers. Trevor turned off the radio, preferring silence to the chatter about an election that now seemed trivial compared to his personal mission. If his mother's claims were true, how many elections had been influenced by the group she had discovered? How deep did this conspiracy run? And most importantly, was she truly alive and waiting to meet him, or was the voice on the phone part of an elaborate deception? He arrived in Pittsburgh shortly before 11:30 p.m., parking his car several blocks from the Carver Street Bridge in a 24-hour grocery store lot where it wouldn't attract attention. Activating the body camera and voice recorder, he began the walk toward the bridge, rain still falling softly from a starless sky. The streets were largely empty, occasional cars passing with swishing tires on wet pavement. As he approached the bridge, Trevor's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the moment 14 years of searching had led to. And either his mother would be waiting, or he couldn't complete the thought. The alternative was too painful to contemplate. The Carver Street Bridge loomed ahead, its steel framework silhouetted against the city's ambient glow. Streetlights cast pools of yellow illumination at irregular intervals, creating alternating patches of light and shadow across the walkway. But Trevor checked his watch, 11:52 p.m. He was early. NT. Montu. He positioned himself midway across the bridge, back against the railing, where he could observe both approaches. The rain had intensified slightly, creating a constant patter on his jacket hood and a rhythmic drumming on the metal bridge structure. Water streamed in rivulets down the support beams and dripped from the overhead framework. At 11:58 p.m., headlights appeared at the far end of the bridge. A dark sedan moved slowly onto the span, its wipers beating steadily against the rain. Trevor tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the recorder in his pocket, ensuring it was still running. The car stopped approximately 50 yards from where he stood. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a figure emerged, holding an umbrella that obscured their face. Trevor remained motionless, watching as the figure closed the car door and began walking toward him with measured steps. The distance between them shortened 40 yards, 30, 20, until finally, the umbrella tilted back to reveal the face beneath. It was a woman in her mid-50s, her auburn hair now streaked with gray, her face thinner than he remembered, lined with age and stress. But the eyes, those were unchanged. The same warm brown eyes that had watched him grow up, that had crinkled at the corners when she laughed, that had filled with pride at his accomplishments. "Mom," Trevor whispered, his voice nearly lost in the sound of falling rain. Diane Peterson stood before her son, 14 years of separation hanging between them like a physical barrier. "Trevor," she said, her voice breaking on his name, "look at you. You have grown so much." They moved toward each other simultaneously, the umbrella dropping forgotten to the wet pavement as Diane reached for her son. The embrace was fierce, desperate, both of them clinging as if afraid the other might vanish if they let go. "I thought you were dead," Trevor said into her shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "For years I thought you were gone forever." "I'm so sorry," Diane whispered, her tears mingling with raindrops on her face. "I never wanted to leave you. They gave me no choice." They separated slightly, still holding onto each other's arms, unwilling to break contact completely. Trevor studied his mother's face, noting new lines around her eyes, a scar near her hairline he didn't remember, the gauntness in her cheeks that spoke of hardship. "What happened?" he asked. "That day at the school. What did you see?" Diane glanced nervously over her shoulder toward the car, then back at Trevor. "We don't have much time. They think I'm meeting a contact to hand over the evidence. They will realize soon enough that I have betrayed them." "Who are they?" Trevor pressed. "A private security firm called Sentinel Holdings," Diane replied. "They were contracted by a group with connections to foreign intelligence services. The goal was to test software designed to manipulate vote tabulation in electronic voting systems, software that could be deployed nationwide in future elections." She reached into her coat pocket and removed a small USB drive, pressing it into Trevor's hand. "Everything's on here. The code I discovered in 2002. The documentation of their operations since then. Names of everyone involved. I have been gathering it piece by piece for 14 years, waiting for the right moment." Trevor closed his fingers around the drive, the small device representing the truth he'd sought for so long. "Why didn't you come forward sooner? Why let us think you were dead?" Pain flashed across Diane's face. "They threatened to kill you and your father if I didn't cooperate. They staged my disappearance to look mysterious enough that questions would be asked, but made sure no evidence would be found. They kept me under constant surveillance, moving me between locations. I worked for them, using my programming skills to refine their software. All the while I was secretly documenting everything." She squeezed Trevor's hand. When I saw on the news that the case had been reopened, that they'd found my belongings, I knew it might be my only chance. And they have become complacent over the years, less careful with their monitoring. They believe I'm resigned to my situation. We need to get you somewhere safe, Trevor said urgently. I can take you to the police. No, Diane interrupted. Not yet. That USB drive needs to get to someone who can make it public immediately, someone they can't silence or discredit. I have a contact at the Washington Post. Once the information is published, then we can go to the authorities. A sudden noise, car doors slamming, drew their attention to the far end of the bridge. The two vehicles had arrived, blocking that exit. Figures were emerging, moving with purposeful strides toward them. They have realized, Diane said, fear edging her voice. Trevor, you need to go. Now. Take the evidence and run. My contact's name and secure email is on the drive. I'm not leaving you, Trevor insisted, gripping her arm. Not again. You must, she urged, already pushing him toward the opposite end of the bridge. I will create a diversion. Get that drive to my contact. It's the only way to end this, the only way we will ever be safe. Before Trevor could argue further, another car appeared at the other end of the bridge, cutting off their remaining escape route. They were trapped. Diane's face hardened with resolve. Over the railing, she said, pulling Trevor toward the edge. The maintenance walkway runs underneath. We can follow it to the support pier and climb down to the riverbank. Without waiting for his response, Diane swung her legs over the railing, finding the narrow metal walkway that ran beneath the main bridge deck. Trevor followed, his heart pounding as he lowered himself onto the precarious path. Above them, shouts and footsteps indicated their pursuers were closing in. The maintenance walkway was barely 2 feet wide, with only a single handrail between them and a 70-foot drop to the dark water below. Rain made the metal treacherous, their shoes slipping slightly with each careful step. They moved as quickly as they dared, heading toward the massive concrete pier that supported this section of the bridge. Flashlight beams cut through the rain above them, sweeping across the bridge deck as their pursuers searched. Trevor and Diane pressed themselves against the understructure, trying to remain hidden from the lights. The pier is 30 feet ahead, Diane whispered. There's a maintenance ladder that leads down to the base. They continued their precarious journey, the wind and rain intensifying as if conspiring against them. Trevor kept one hand on the railing and the other gripping his mother's jacket, terrified of losing her in the darkness. A shout from above suggested they had been spotted. Moments later, a flashlight beam found them, illuminating their hunched figures on the narrow walkway. Keep moving, Diane urged, increasing her pace despite the danger. They reached the concrete pier just as the first of their pursuers began climbing over the bridge railing. The maintenance ladder was there as Diane had described, a series of metal rungs embedded in the concrete, leading down to the riverbank below. You first, Diane insisted, pushing Trevor toward the ladder. He hesitated, reluctant to leave her exposed on the walkway, but the urgency in her eyes convinced him. Trevor swung onto the ladder and began his descent, the metal rungs slick with rain and river spray. Above him, Diane followed, her movements betraying years of age and hardship that hadn't been present when she disappeared. They were halfway down when a shot rang out, the sound echoing across the water. Trevor looked up in horror to see his mother flinch, her grip on the ladder faltering momentarily. "Mom," he cried. "Keep going," she gritted out. "I'm fine." But the dark stains spreading across her left shoulder told a different story. Diane had been hit, the bullet tearing through the fabric of her coat and into flesh beneath. Still, she continued climbing, her determination evident in every labored movement. They reached the muddy riverbank as more shots rang out, bullets striking the concrete pier around them. Trevor helped his mother away from the bridge, supporting her weight as they stumbled through the darkness toward a tangle of abandoned industrial equipment that might provide cover. "The drive," Diane gasped, her breathing labored from pain and exertion. "Make sure it gets to Nicholas Holloway at the post. The password is Trevorjack 2002. Stop talking like that, Trevor insisted, guiding her behind a rusted shipping container. We are both getting out of here. I'm not losing you again. He helped her sit with her back against the container, then quickly examined her wound in the dim light. The bullet had passed through her shoulder, leaving an entry and exit wound that were bleeding steadily but not catastrophically. Using the first aid kit from his backpack, Trevor applied pressure bandages to both wounds, his hands working with desperate efficiency. We need to keep moving, he said, glancing back toward the bridge where flashlights were now visible on the riverbank. Can you walk? Diane nodded grimly, allowing Trevor to help her to her feet. There's an old service tunnel about a quarter-mile downriver, she said. It connects to the city's drainage system. We can lose them there. They moved along the riverbank, staying close to the water's edge where shadows were deepest. Diane leaned heavily on Trevor, her injured arm cradled against her chest, her face pale with pain and blood loss. Behind them, voices called out as their pursuers spread out to search the area. The entrance to the service tunnel was partially hidden behind overgrown vegetation, its rusted metal door hanging ajar. Trevor helped his mother inside, the darkness of the tunnel swallowing them as they moved beyond the entrance. He activated the flashlight from his pack, revealing a concrete passage that stretched ahead, ankle-deep water flowing sluggishly along its bottom. This way, Diane directed, her voice weaker now. There's a junction about 500 yards in. We can turn off into a maintenance room where they store equipment. Should be safe to rest there. They sloshed through the shallow water, the sounds of their pursuers growing fainter behind them. The tunnel air was dank and stale, carrying the musty scent of decades of moisture and neglect. Occasionally, Diane would stumble, her strength clearly failing, but she pushed on with grim determination. At the junction, they turned left into a narrower passage that ended at a metal door marked Maintenance, authorized personnel only. Inside was a small room with shelves of aging equipment, tools, and supplies. Trevor helped his mother to a relatively clean workbench, where she could sit while he checked her wound. The bandages were soaked through with blood. Diane's face had grown alarmingly pale, her breathing shallow and rapid. Trevor replaced the bandages with fresh ones from his kit, trying to control his rising panic. "You need a hospital," he said, securing the new bandage. "Not yet," Diane replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not until we know the drive is safe. They have people everywhere, police, hospitals. We can't risk it until the information is public." Trevor crouched before her, taking her uninjured hand in his. "Mom, you have lost a lot of blood. This isn't negotiable." Diane squeezed his hand weakly. "Trevor, listen to me. What's on that drive is bigger than either of us. It documents 14 years of election interference operations. Well, not just here, but in countries around the world. Sentinel Holdings has manipulated election outcomes in dozens of nations, always at the direction of their clients, always for profit and power." She paused, gathering strength to continue. "They are planning something major for tonight. A coordinated effort to manipulate results in key districts across 7 states. The evidence on that drive could stop them, but only if it reaches the right hands immediately." Trevor felt the weight of the USB drive in his pocket, suddenly understanding the magnitude of what his mother had uncovered. This wasn't just about her disappearance or the mystery of voting booth 7. This was about the fundamental integrity of democratic systems worldwide. "I will call Nicholas Holloway," Trevor decided, pulling out his phone. "Right now. Then we get you medical help." No signal. The concrete tunnel blocked reception completely. "We need to get to the surface," Trevor said, helping his mother to her feet. "There's another exit from these tunnels, isn't there?" Diane nodded weakly. 3 blocks north. Maintenance access in an alley behind the old paper factory. They made their way back to the junction and took the right-hand passage, moving as quickly as Diane's condition would allow. Trevor supported most of her weight now, increasingly concerned by her pallor and the cold sweat that had broken out across her forehead, signs of advancing shock from blood loss. After what seemed an eternity of navigating dark tunnels, they reached a ladder leading up to a manhole cover. Trevor helped his mother sit against the wall while he climbed up to test the exit. The cover moved with effort, revealing a sliver of night sky and the continuing rainfall. "It looks clear," Trevor reported, descending to help his mother. "But you are not going to be able to climb in your condition." Diane looked up at the ladder, then back at her son, her expression resolute despite her weakness. "I will make it," she said simply. The ascent was agonizing to watch. Diane climbed one-handed, her injured arm practically useless, each rung requiring monumental effort. Trevor followed directly beneath her, ready to catch her if she fell, offering encouragement with every step. Somehow, through sheer force of will, Diane reached the top, and Trevor helped push the cover fully aside, then supported her as she dragged herself out onto the wet pavement of the alley. He followed quickly, replacing the cover before gathering his mother into his arms. "We did it," he said softly, brushing wet hair from her face. "We made it out. We made it out." And Diane managed a weak smile. "You always were stubborn, just like your father." Trevor checked his phone. A weak signal, but enough to make a call. He helped his mother to a sheltered doorway, then pulled up the browser on his phone, searching for contact information for the Washington Post. Finding a general newsroom number, he dialed, praying someone would answer at this late hour. "Washington Post newsroom, this is Andrea. I need to speak with Nicholas Holloway immediately," Trevor said urgently. It's a matter of national security." "Mr. Holloway isn't available right now," the voice replied. "Can I take a message?" "Please, this is life or death," Trevor insisted. "My name is Trevor Peterson. My mother, Diane Peterson, has been missing for 14 years after discovering evidence of election fraud. She has critical information about ongoing manipulation of tonight's results. Mr. Holloway is expecting this call." There was a pause on the line. "One moment, please." The seconds stretched interminably as Trevor waited, watching his mother's condition deteriorate. Her eyes had closed, her breathing becoming more labored. "This is Nick Holloway." A new voice, deep and cautious, came on the line. "Mr. Holloway, my name is Trevor Peterson. My mother, Diane Peterson, sent me to you with evidence regarding Sentinel Holdings and their election interference operations. She's been held captive for 14 years, and now she's been shot. We need help." By coin. Another pause. "Where are you now?" Trevor described their location as best he could, mentioning the paper factory and the alley. "Stay put," Holloway instructed. "I'm sending someone to you. They will identify themselves with the phrase, 'The integrity of the vote is sacred.' Do not trust anyone else. Do you have the evidence?" "Yes," Trevor confirmed. "A USB drive. My mother says the password is Trevorjack 2002. "Good. My colleague will be there in approximately 15 minutes. He will bring medical assistance and transport you both to a secure location." The call ended, leaving Trevor in the rain-soaked alley with his injured mother. He crouched beside her, checking her pulse, weak but present. "Help is coming, Mom," he whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Trevor kept watch at the alley entrance, alert for any sign of approach, whether friend or foe. Diane drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring occasionally, sometimes Trevor's name, sometimes his father's. Finally, headlights appeared on the street beyond the alley. A dark SUV stopped, and a man emerged, carrying what appeared to be a medical bag. Trevor tensed, ready to retreat if necessary. The man approached cautiously, hands visible. "The integrity of the vote is sacred," he said clearly. Relief flooded through Trevor. "Over here," he called, waving the man toward the doorway where Diane rested. The newcomer moved quickly to Diane's side, opening his bag to reveal professional medical supplies. "I'm Dr. Malik," he said, already examining Diane's wound. "I work with Nick Holloway. Let's get your mother stabilized, then we need to move quickly." Dr. Malik worked efficiently, administering medication for pain and shock, starting an IV line, and properly dressing the bullet wounds. "She's lost a significant amount of blood," he told Trevor. but the bullet passed clean through without hitting any major vessels or bones. With proper care, she should recover fully. But once Diane was stabilized, Dr. Malik helped Trevor carry her to the waiting SUV. They placed her carefully in the back seat, where Trevor joined her, supporting her head on his lap. Dr. Malik took the driver's seat. "Where are we going?" Trevor asked as they pulled away from the curb. "Secure location outside the city," Dr. Malik replied, checking mirrors frequently as he drove. "Nick is meeting us there with a technical team to examine the evidence immediately." They drove through the rainy Pittsburgh streets, taking an erratic route with frequent turns and direction changes clearly designed to shake any potential pursuit. Eventually, they merged onto a highway heading south, the city lights receding behind them. After approximately 40 minutes of driving, they turned onto a private road leading to what appeared to be a converted farmhouse. Lights blazed from the windows, and several vehicles were parked in the gravel drive. As their SUV stopped, the front door opened, revealing a tall man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He approached quickly, opening the back door to help with Diane. "Nick Holloway," he introduced himself to Trevor as they carefully extracted Diane from the vehicle. "Let's get your mother inside. We have a room prepared with medical equipment." The interior of the farmhouse belied its rustic exterior. Modern technology filled what had once been a living room, with computers, servers, and communications equipment creating a makeshift newsroom and technical lab. Several people worked at monitors, their faces illuminated by screen glow. Diane was taken to a bedroom that had been converted to a recovery space, complete with hospital bed, monitoring equipment, and IV stands. And a woman in scrubs waited there, immediately taking over Diane's care from Dr. Malik. "Mek, Mentu, Manis, Myers, Wibrang." "She's a trauma nurse," Holloway explained to Trevor. "Your mother is in good hands." Once assured that Diane was receiving proper care, Trevor followed Holloway to the main room. "The evidence," Holloway said, extending his hand. Trevor removed the USB drive from his pocket, suddenly reluctant to part with it. This small device had cost his mother 14 years of her life and nearly resulted in her death. It represented the only leverage they had against powerful forces that would not hesitate to silence them permanently. "Mr. Peterson," Holloway said gently, seeming to understand Trevor's hesitation, "I have been investigating Sentinel Holdings for 3 years. Your mother contacted me 6 months ago using an encrypted channel. She's been feeding me breadcrumbs, helping me build the foundation for this story. But without the hard evidence she promised, what's on that drive we can't publish. And without publication, you and your mother will never be safe." Trevor studied the journalist's face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, he placed the USB drive in Holloway's palm. And the password. "Trevorjak 2002, Holloway nodded. "Your name and your father's, with the year your mother disappeared." "I remember." "They remember." He handed the drive to a woman seated at a computer station. "Analyze everything. Priority on tonight's operations. We need to go live before polls close on the West Coast." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Trevor divided his time between his mother's bedside, where she rested more comfortably after receiving blood transfusions and proper medical care, and the main room, where Holloway's team worked feverishly to analyze the evidence Diane had collected. The contents of the drive proved even more explosive than anticipated. It contained not only the original code Diane had discovered in 2002, but comprehensive documentation of Sentinel Holdings operations over 14 years. But internal memos, client lists, financial transactions, and technical specifications for voting machine manipulation software. Most crucially, it included detailed plans for interference in that very night's election, with specific precincts targeted in key swing states. "My God," Holloway murmured as they reviewed the evidence. "They have been at this for decades, not just here, worldwide, manipulating elections in developing nations, influencing referendums in Europe. From the client list, corporations, political action committees, foreign intelligence services." By 3 a.m., as vote counting continued across the country, the Washington Post published its first breaking news alert, exclusive evidence of systematic election interference, uncovered by woman missing since 2002. The full story followed shortly after, complete with redacted documents and technical analyses. Other news organizations quickly picked up the bombshell report. By dawn, federal authorities had issued statements announcing investigations. Sentinel Holdings offices in 3 cities were raided by FBI agents. Key figures named in the documents were being sought for questioning. In the farmhouse, Trevor sat beside his mother's bed, holding her hand as she slept. A television in the corner broadcast continuous coverage of the unfolding scandal, anchors struggling to convey the magnitude of what had been uncovered. Diane's eyes fluttered open, finding Trevor's face immediately. "Did we do it?" she asked, her voice stronger than it had been in the alley. Trevor nodded, squeezing her hand. "It's out. All of it. Holloway's story is everywhere. Federal investigations have already started." Relief washed across Diane's features. 14 years, she whispered. 14 years of gathering evidence, of waiting for the right moment. There were times I thought I'd never see you again, never be able to tell you the truth. "Why didn't you try to contact me sooner?" Trevor asked, the question that had burned in him since her phone call. "They watched me constantly in the early years," Diane explained. "They monitored every communication, every movement. They showed me surveillance photos of you and your father to remind me what I had to lose if I didn't cooperate. It was only in the last few years, as their operation grew and their security protocols became stretched, that I found opportunities to gather evidence and plan." She squeezed his hand. "When your father died, I didn't know, Trevor. If I had, I might have risked everything then. I'm so sorry you had to face that alone." Trevor swallowed the knot in his throat. "He never stopped looking for you. Neither of us did." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "Tell me about him, about your life. I have missed so much." As morning light filtered through the curtains, Trevor shared 14 years of memories with his mother. He told her about his father's unwavering belief that she was still alive somewhere, about his own college years, his career, his solitary life in Millfield, about the annual vigils at the elementary school parking lot, about finding the box in Principal Garner's old office that had finally restarted the investigation. In turn, Diane shared fragments of her captivity. After being confronted in the voting booth by men claiming to be federal agents, that she had been taken through the school's fire exit, its alarm disabled beforehand, and transported to a secure facility in West Virginia. There, she was given a choice: work for Sentinel Holdings using her software expertise, or her family would suffer accidents. For years, she had been moved between facilities, always under guard, always reminded of the consequences of non-compliance. But she had been patient, gathering evidence bit by bit, hiding her true intentions behind a mask of resigned cooperation. "They underestimated me," Diane said with a hint of the determination that had kept her going for 14 years. "They thought a mother would be too frightened for her family to fight back. But being a mother is precisely why I couldn't let them succeed." By mid-morning, federal agents arrived at the farmhouse to take formal statements from Diane and Trevor. Holloway had negotiated terms that ensured their safety and medical care for Diane. The evidence she had gathered was now part of multiple federal investigations, with international ramifications that were still unfolding. Diane Peterson, the lead agent, said after recording her initial statement, "What you have uncovered may be the most significant threat to electoral systems ever documented. The Justice Department is prepared to offer you full protection as a key witness." Diane, sitting up in bed with Trevor beside her, nodded tiredly. "I just want to go home," she said. "After 14 years, I want to see my house again." The agent exchanged glances with Holloway. "We can arrange that, but not immediately. There are still individuals connected to Sentinel Holdings who haven't been apprehended. Safety remains our priority." In the days that followed, the full scope of what Diane had uncovered became clearer. Sentinel Holdings had begun as a legitimate election system security firm before being acquired by private interests with connections to foreign intelligence services. Over time, it had evolved into a sophisticated operation capable of subtly manipulating election results without detection, selling its services to the highest bidders, but regardless of ideology or nationality. The 2002 incident in Millfield had been one of their earliest test deployments, a small-scale trial in a rural Pennsylvania precinct considered insignificant enough to avoid scrutiny. Diane Peterson, with her background in software engineering, had recognized anomalies in the code when examining the voting machine out of professional curiosity. Her disappearance had been meant as both a warning to others and a recruitment of her valuable skills. As Diane recovered from her injury, she and Trevor remained under federal protection at a secure location outside Washington, D.C. News coverage of the scandal continued, with congressional hearings announced and international investigations launched in countries where Sentinel had operated. 1 month after the bridge confrontation, Diane was finally cleared to return to Millfield. Federal agents accompanied them, the threat not entirely eliminated but significantly reduced as more Sentinel operatives were apprehended. The drive back to Millfield was surreal for both of them, a journey Diane had imagined countless times during her captivity. The town had changed little in 14 years, the same storefronts lining Main Street, the same gazebo in the town square. When they reached the Peterson home, Diane stood in the driveway for a long moment, taking in the sight of the house she'd left on November 5, 2002, expecting to return within the hour. Trevor stood beside her, watching emotions play across her face: joy, grief, disbelief that she was finally home. Inside, the house had evolved with Trevor's life. His father's armchair remained in the living room, but the walls now held Trevor's college diploma, photos of his adult life. Diane moved through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects, discovering new ones, rebuilding her mental map of the home that had been preserved in her memory. In the kitchen, she paused before a photograph on the refrigerator: Jack Peterson standing beside a teenage Trevor at a fishing dock, both smiling broadly, and the sun setting behind them. "That was the summer before you disappeared," Trevor said quietly. "Dad's favorite fishing spot on Lake Erie." Diane touched the photo gently. "He looks so happy." "He was that day," Trevor replied. "He always said that even with you gone, he was grateful for what we had for you, for me, for every moment we'd shared as a family. He never became bitter, Mom. He just kept loving you and missing you." Tears spilled down Diane's cheeks. "I held on to that, the thought of both of you carrying on, living good lives. It was what kept me going on the darkest days." As winter settled over Millfield, Diane and Trevor began the complex process of rebuilding their life together. The legal proceedings against Sentinel Holdings and its operatives continued, requiring occasional testimony from Diane. Media requests for interviews arrived daily, most of which they declined. The community of Millfield rallied around them, providing both support and space to heal.